Have you ever met someone who seemed completely comfortable with physical intimacy, yet became distant the moment the relationship started becoming emotionally serious? At first, everything felt effortless. The chemistry was undeniable. Conversations lasted for hours. The attraction felt almost magnetic. You believed you had finally found someone who understood you on every level. Then something changed. As the emotional connection deepened, they began pulling away. They became slower to respond. They seemed uncomfortable when conversations became vulnerable. They avoided discussing the future. They appeared present physically but emotionally unavailable. You found yourself wondering, how can someone be so close one moment and so distant the next? For many people, this experience is deeply confusing because they naturally assume that physical closeness and emotional closeness grow together. In healthy relationships, they often do. Emotional trust strengthens physical intimacy, and physical intimacy reinforces emotional trust. Both grow side by side. But attachment theory teaches us that this is not always how every nervous system experiences relationships, as Dr. Ramani frequently explains when discussing attachment patterns and emotionally unavailable relationships. Some individuals with an avoidant attachment style may genuinely desire connection while also feeling threatened by increasing emotional dependence or vulnerability. This does not mean they do not care. It means that emotional closeness can activate fears that they have learned, often over many years, to manage by creating distance. Understanding this distinction can completely change the way you interpret their behavior. Many people assume if they were physically affectionate, they must be emotionally ready. Unfortunately, those two things are not always the same. For some avoidantly attached individuals, physical intimacy may feel more manageable than sustained emotional openness because it can involve fewer conversations about needs, fears, commitment, or dependency. That does not make the connection fake. Nor does it automatically make the relationship healthy. It simply means that emotional intimacy and physical intimacy may not develop at the same pace. Imagine climbing a mountain with another person. You are excited because every step upward brings you closer together. Suddenly, just as you reach the most beautiful part of the journey, your partner stops walking, not because they hate the mountain, not because they dislike you, but because higher ground feels unfamiliar and frightening. While you are thinking, we're getting closer, they may be thinking, I'm losing my independence. The destination looks the same. The emotional experience is completely different. This difference often leaves partners blaming themselves. They ask questions that slowly erode their confidence. Did I become too needy? Did I ask for too much? Was I too emotional? Should I have stayed quiet? Should I have hidden my feelings? Those questions are understandable, but they are usually the wrong questions. A healthier question is this: can this relationship provide the level of emotional safety and consistency that both of us need? That question shifts the focus away from self-blame and toward compatibility. One of the most difficult lessons to learn is that chemistry alone cannot sustain a relationship. Chemistry can bring two people together. Character determines whether they stay together. Passion can begin a relationship. Emotional maturity helps it endure. Attraction creates excitement. Consistency creates trust. Many people spend years chasing the intensity they experience during the first few months of an emotionally inconsistent relationship. They remember the excitement. They remember the butterflies. They remember feeling completely desired. What they often forget is the anxiety that followed. The sleepless nights, the unanswered messages, the uncertainty, the constant wondering about where the relationship stood, the fear of saying the wrong thing. That is not emotional safety. That is emotional uncertainty. And uncertainty often feels exciting only because it keeps the nervous system activated. Real love feels different. Real love allows you to exhale. Real love does not make you question your value every week. Real love does not require you to decode every text message or analyze every silence. Real love welcomes honest conversations instead of avoiding them. It allows both people to express fears without punishment. It creates space for vulnerability instead of treating it as weakness. Dr. Ramani often reminds people that emotionally healthy relationships are built on consistency rather than emotional extremes. Consistency may not feel as dramatic as uncertainty. It may not produce the same emotional highs, but consistency produces something far more valuable: peace. Peace is often unfamiliar to people who have spent years confusing unpredictability with passion. At first, a peaceful relationship can even seem boring. Why? Because your nervous system has become accustomed to chaos. When chaos disappears, your body may mistakenly interpret calmness as a lack of excitement. Healing involves retraining yourself to recognize that calm is not the absence of love. Calm is often one of its strongest signs. Another important lesson is understanding that you cannot love someone out of an attachment pattern. You cannot heal another person's fear of vulnerability simply by becoming more patient. You cannot create emotional availability through sacrifice alone. Growth requires awareness, willingness, and consistent effort from the person experiencing those patterns. Love can support change. Love cannot replace personal responsibility. This realization can feel painful because many compassionate people believe that if they simply love harder, communicate better, or wait longer, everything will eventually improve. Sometimes relationships do improve when both partners are committed to understanding themselves and growing together. Sometimes they do not. Your responsibility is not to rescue another adult from their emotional struggles. Your responsibility is to protect your own emotional well-being while offering empathy without abandoning your own needs. That is the balance of healthy love. You deserve a relationship where physical closeness and emotional closeness support each other rather than compete with each other. You deserve conversations where vulnerability is welcomed. You deserve consistency instead of confusion. You deserve honesty instead of guessing. You deserve reassurance instead of emotional uncertainty. Most importantly, you deserve a relationship in which you never feel that expressing your needs will drive the other person away. As you continue your own journey of healing, remember this: someone else's discomfort with emotional vulnerability is not proof that you are too much. Wanting communication is not being needy. Wanting consistency is not being demanding. Wanting emotional safety is not asking for perfection. These are the basic foundations of healthy relationships. So stop measuring love only by intensity. Start measuring it by consistency. Stop measuring it only by attraction. Start measuring it by emotional safety. Stop asking, how deeply do they make me feel? Start asking, how safely can we grow together? Because the strongest relationships are not built on the highest emotional highs. They are built on the quiet confidence that both people can be fully seen, fully honest, and fully respected without fear. That is where lasting intimacy begins. That is where secure love grows. And that is the kind of relationship every heart deserves. One of the most emotionally exhausting experiences a person can have is falling in love with someone who seems to move constantly between closeness and distance. One week, they make you feel like the most important person in the world. They are affectionate, attentive, and deeply engaged. They send thoughtful messages, make exciting plans, and create moments that leave you feeling hopeful about the future. You begin to believe that the relationship is finally becoming stable. Then, almost without warning, something shifts. The messages become shorter, the phone calls become less frequent, the affection becomes inconsistent, plans are canceled. Conversations become superficial. When you ask if something is wrong, you may hear, "I'm just busy, I need space," or "You're overthinking this." Suddenly, you are no longer enjoying the relationship. You are trying to understand it. You start searching for answers. Did I say something wrong? Did I become too available? Was I expecting too much? Should I give them more space? Before long, your emotional energy is no longer invested in building a healthy partnership. It is consumed by solving a mystery. This is one reason these relationships can feel so emotionally powerful. The uncertainty itself captures your attention. Your mind becomes focused on predicting the next change instead of simply experiencing love. As Dr. Ramani often explains when discussing emotionally inconsistent relationships, unpredictability can become deeply compelling. Intermittent reinforcement, receiving affection inconsistently rather than consistently, can make it surprisingly difficult to step away, even when the relationship leaves you feeling anxious or emotionally depleted. Think of it like trying to predict the weather in a place where the forecast changes every hour. One moment the sky is clear, the next moment a storm appears. Just as you adjust to the rain, the sun returns. You never know what tomorrow will bring. Eventually, instead of enjoying the day, you spend all your energy preparing for the next unexpected change. That is what emotional inconsistency can feel like. Instead of feeling secure, you become hyper-aware. You study every text message. You analyze every pause in conversation. You notice changes in tone. You worry about how quickly they replied. You replay interactions repeatedly, hoping to discover what you missed. Little by little, anxiety replaces peace. Many people mistakenly interpret this anxiety as evidence of deep love. But anxiety and love are not the same thing. Constant uncertainty is not proof that someone is your soulmate. Feeling emotionally overwhelmed is not evidence that the connection is uniquely meaningful. Sometimes it is simply evidence that your nervous system has become trapped in a cycle of unpredictability. Healthy love feels different. Healthy love allows you to relax. It allows you to focus on your own life instead of constantly monitoring another person's emotional availability. It gives you confidence rather than confusion. One of the greatest dangers of the push and pull dynamic is that it slowly teaches you to ignore your own needs. You stop asking whether you are happy. Instead, you ask whether they are happy. You stop asking whether your boundaries are respected. Instead, you ask how to avoid upsetting them. You stop asking whether the relationship is healthy. Instead, you ask how to keep it from ending. Without realizing it, the center of your emotional world shifts away from yourself. Your self-worth begins rising and falling according to another person's level of attention. When they move closer, you feel hopeful. When they withdraw, you feel rejected. Your emotional stability becomes dependent on their inconsistencies. This is an exhausting way to live. No one can experience lasting peace when their emotional well-being depends entirely on another person's unpredictable behavior. It is important to remember that people may withdraw for many different reasons. Stress, life circumstances, mental health, and attachment patterns can all influence how someone relates to others. Not every period of distance is unhealthy. What matters is the overall pattern and whether both partners can communicate honestly, respect each other's needs, and work together toward greater security. A healthy relationship is not one where nobody ever needs space. It is one where both people can talk openly about that need without creating fear or confusion. There is a profound difference between saying, "I need a quiet evening to recharge, but I still care about you," and disappearing without explanation for days while leaving your partner wondering whether the relationship is ending. Healthy communication reduces uncertainty. Avoidance without communication often increases it. Many survivors spend years believing that if they become more understanding, the inconsistency will disappear. They become endlessly patient. They stop expressing disappointment. They lower their expectations. They accept less than they deserve because they hope today's distance will eventually lead back to yesterday's closeness. But a healthy relationship cannot be sustained by hope alone. It requires mutual effort, mutual accountability, mutual honesty, mutual emotional availability. Those qualities cannot come from only one partner. One of the most liberating moments in recovery is recognizing that you are not responsible for managing another person's attachment style. You cannot force someone to become emotionally available. You cannot heal another person's fear of closeness through endless sacrifice. You cannot create consistency by ignoring your own needs. Real growth happens when each person takes responsibility for understanding themselves and for building healthier ways of relating to others. Your responsibility is different. Your responsibility is to recognize what allows you to thrive. Do you feel emotionally safe? Can you express your needs without fear? Can disagreements happen without constant withdrawal or punishment? Can both people repair misunderstandings with honesty and respect? Those are the questions that matter. As you begin healing, something remarkable changes. You stop chasing moments of intensity. You start appreciating moments of stability. You stop confusing unpredictability with passion. You begin recognizing consistency as one of the greatest expressions of love. You no longer measure a relationship by how dramatic it feels. You measure it by how peaceful it feels. That shift changes everything because peace is not boring. Peace is what allows trust to grow. Peace is what allows vulnerability to flourish. Peace is what makes genuine intimacy possible. There will always be challenges in every relationship. No partnership is perfect. No two people communicate flawlessly all the time, but healthy couples repair misunderstandings together rather than allowing confusion to become the foundation of the relationship. They move toward each other instead of remaining trapped in endless cycles of pursuit and withdrawal. If you have spent years believing that love must always feel like an emotional roller coaster, let today become the day you challenge that belief. Real love is not measured by how high the highs are. It is measured by how safe you feel during ordinary days. Real love is not about constantly wondering where you stand. It is about knowing that even when difficulties arise, both people remain committed to honesty, respect, and working through them together. You deserve that kind of love. You deserve conversations instead of guessing. You deserve reassurance instead of uncertainty. You deserve consistency instead of confusion. Most importantly, you deserve a relationship where your nervous system can finally rest instead of remaining on constant alert. Because the strongest relationships are not built on emotional extremes, they are built on trust. And trust grows one consistent choice, one honest conversation, and one act of mutual respect at a time. When you begin choosing peace over unpredictability, you are not settling for less excitement. You are choosing more emotional freedom. That is the kind of love that lasts. That is the kind of connection that heals. And that is the kind of relationship worth waiting for. Perhaps the greatest lesson you will ever learn about relationships is this: the strongest love is rarely the loudest love. Many people spend years believing that love is supposed to feel like an emotional roller coaster. They think that if a relationship is full of dramatic highs, overwhelming passion, constant longing, and heartbreaking reunions, it must be something extraordinary. They mistake emotional intensity for emotional depth. They believe that if someone has the power to make them feel incredible one day and devastated the next, that person must be their soulmate. But as Dr. Ramani often teaches, intensity is not the same as intimacy. Those two words sound similar, yet they represent completely different experiences. Intensity is driven by uncertainty. Intimacy is built on trust. Intensity keeps you wondering. Intimacy helps you understand. Intensity creates emotional highs and lows. Intimacy creates emotional safety. The problem is that many of us were never taught the difference. Movies celebrate dramatic romance. Television often portrays jealousy as passion. Social media glorifies relationships filled with emotional extremes. Very few people are taught that the healthiest relationships often look surprisingly calm. Healthy love is not boring. It is peaceful. There is a tremendous difference. Peace does not mean the absence of passion. Peace means the absence of constant fear. It means you no longer wake up wondering whether your partner still loves you. It means you do not spend hours analyzing every message they send. It means disagreements do not automatically make you fear abandonment. It means honesty is welcomed rather than punished. It means both people feel emotionally safe enough to be completely authentic. Imagine walking into a home after a long day. In one home, you never know what will happen. Will there be an argument? Will someone ignore you? Will you be criticized? Will you have to defend yourself? Your shoulders tense before you even open the door. Your heart beats faster. Your nervous system prepares for conflict. Now imagine another home. You walk inside knowing you are respected. You know disagreements can be discussed without humiliation. You know your emotions will be heard instead of dismissed. You know mistakes can be repaired without endless punishment. Your body relaxes. You breathe differently. You feel safe. That feeling is what healthy love is meant to create. Many survivors of emotionally inconsistent relationships discover that peace initially feels unfamiliar. In fact, some people mistake peaceful relationships for a lack of chemistry. Why? Because their nervous system has become accustomed to unpredictability. When chaos has been your normal for years, calmness can seem unusual. You may even think something is missing. You ask yourself, why don't I feel those intense butterflies anymore? Why isn't this relationship as exciting? Shouldn't love feel more dramatic? The answer may surprise you. Butterflies are not always a sign of compatibility. Sometimes they are a sign of uncertainty. Sometimes they are your body's response to not knowing whether you are emotionally safe. Healthy love does not eliminate attraction. It simply allows attraction to exist without fear. Dr. Ramani frequently encourages people to evaluate relationships by asking a different set of questions. Instead of asking, "How intensely do I feel about this person?" Ask, "How do I feel about myself when I am with this person?" That question changes everything. Do you feel respected? Do you feel heard? Can you express your opinions without fear? Do you feel accepted when you make mistakes? Can you set boundaries without punishment? Can you disagree without worrying that the relationship will suddenly disappear? Those are the questions that reveal emotional maturity. Because a healthy relationship should improve your relationship with yourself. It should not constantly make you question your worth. One of the greatest transformations during healing is realizing that you no longer need relationships that keep you guessing. You begin appreciating consistency. You appreciate someone who follows through on their promises, someone who communicates honestly, someone who apologizes sincerely when they make mistakes, someone whose words and actions match. At first, this may not seem exciting, but over time you discover something extraordinary. Consistency creates trust, trust creates vulnerability, vulnerability creates genuine intimacy, and genuine intimacy creates lasting love. That is the foundation every healthy relationship needs. Another important lesson is learning that emotional safety begins within yourself. Before you can recognize healthy love from another person, you must first create a healthy relationship with yourself. That means listening to your own feelings, respecting your own boundaries, believing your own intuition, speaking to yourself with kindness instead of criticism, choosing people who add peace to your life rather than constant confusion. The stronger your relationship with yourself becomes, the easier it becomes to recognize relationships that truly deserve your time and energy. You stop chasing unavailable people. You stop believing you must earn basic respect. You stop confusing emotional distance with mystery. You stop confusing inconsistency with passion. Instead, you begin looking for something far more meaningful: reliability, kindness, empathy, honesty, mutual effort. Those qualities may not create dramatic stories, but they create stable lives. And stable lives create healthy families, lasting friendships, and deeply fulfilling partnerships. Perhaps you still wonder whether choosing peace means settling for less. Absolutely not. Choosing peace is refusing to settle for emotional chaos. It is choosing a relationship where both people can grow together. It is choosing conversations instead of silent treatment. It is choosing accountability instead of blame. It is choosing compassion instead of manipulation. It is choosing love that strengthens your confidence rather than slowly diminishing it. Remember this truth: real love should make your world bigger. It should encourage your dreams, support your goals, celebrate your growth. Respect your individuality. Healthy love does not ask you to become smaller so another person can feel bigger. Healthy love gives both people room to flourish. If you have spent years chasing emotional intensity, today can become the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where peace is no longer mistaken for boredom, a chapter where consistency becomes attractive, a chapter where emotional safety becomes your new standard. You no longer need to prove your worth. You no longer need to compete for someone's attention. You no longer need to interpret mixed signals as hidden affection. You deserve clarity. You deserve respect. You deserve honesty. You deserve a relationship where your heart feels protected instead of constantly tested. Most importantly, you deserve a love that allows you to become more fully yourself, not less. So as you move forward, remember this simple but life-changing truth. Do not judge a relationship by how intensely it begins. Judge it by how safely it grows. Do not ask whether someone gives you butterflies. Ask whether they give you peace. Do not measure love by emotional highs. Measure it by mutual respect, consistency, accountability, and trust. Because the relationships that truly last are rarely the ones that burn the brightest in a single moment. They are the ones that keep providing warmth, security, and hope through every season of life. That is the love worth waiting for. That is the love worth protecting. And that is the kind of love you deserve. Not because you are perfect, but because every human being deserves to be loved with honesty, dignity, compassion, and emotional safety. When you finally choose that kind of love, you are not giving up excitement. You are choosing something infinitely greater. you are choosing peace. And peace is where lasting love begins.